I love this beautiful vase I found at Pottery Barn, and sometimes it's not even so much the price for me, sometimes it's just the design and the color. You want to switch that up. And this one was on clearance, so the price wasn't even as horrible as I've seen before, where some of these large vases get into the 200 and 300s. We're gonna upcycle this large bottle that was donated to me by a friend. I love that my friends are like, I got glass bottles, and here I'll pull up to their house with a bag and grocery shop. But the absolute worst part is having to get the stupid labels off. Okay. There are so many ways you can go about this. I always try heat gunning it first. Okay. Heat gunning it and then pull in. And then when that don't work, I'll soak the bottle in warm water with soap and water. And then I'll use Perel and alcohol and all the things. If y'all got tips for making people's lives easier with this, put it in the comments. Help out the community. This was not fun. Once I was done that grueling task, it was time to prep our piece. And to prep our piece, I'm using multi-surface paint. This works really well with glass. You can absolutely use whatever you would like. Just make sure on the directions it says it works well with glass. Now we got to get that 3D looking effect, and I grabbed some IOD molds that I borrowed from my good friend Crafty Kathy. She actually works with an IOD stockist and had some in her stash, and I asked if I could borrow some for some upcoming projects, and these two are perfect for this. To attach our clay pieces, we're going to be using this Type Bond Quick and Thick as the medium. This works well on glass, so in case you're wondering what I use, that. And this is my favorite clay. Okay, I even took a picture and left it here. So everybody that asks what my favorite clay is, take a screenshot. Okay, take a screenshot. That's my favorite clay. It dries out quick if you leave it in the air, and it can get crusty, but I like it because it sands down well, especially on furniture pieces. Whenever I'm doing bottle art, I like to stabilize the piece or the section that I'm working on, whatever you want to call it. And I'll take 2 sponge pieces. It's actually 1 sponge I cut in half and put on each side of the bottle. Now I opened this up and just wanted to show you how cool this clay is. I like that it actually looks kind of layered inside of it compared to other clay where it's like just like a whole piece. And then of course I smush it together and then squeeze it in the molds. And I did that off camera because you guys know how to squeeze some clay in molds, right? Anyhow, you see how this is kind of falling apart. Let me tell y'all something about these molds. I've used molds in years. These molds are thick and tough. Okay, now detailed, gorgeous. I love the micro rim, but boy, even here you can see my fingers, they were shaking trying to pry back the mold because it was so thick and strong to get these clay pieces out. My wrists and my hand grip strength wasn't expecting it. I needed an extra gym day before I tackled this crap. Now I grabbed my TDS fan brush that I had off to the side that had like some dried up Mod Podge. It was all stiff. And I grabbed my clay tool, and then I was just scoring the back of these little joints, making sure that I was happy with their placement, cutting them down with my little clay tool so this way they fit the way I wanted to arrange them on the bottle. You can do this with as many different molds. If you don't have the money to grab expensive molds like IOD or Prima, y'all, Amazon has the little fondant joints that people use for cakes and stuff. I get them for like $2.99, $3.99, and sometimes you can get like 5 or 6 little molds for like $11.99. So don't feel like you have to use these exact molds to be able to get a similar look at home, okay? Work with what's in your budget. And people, I'm just being real. I like the test drive before I purchase, so I knew people that had these, and I was like, can I borrow these joints before I start dropping some money on these molds? I'm just saying, I don't have a problem splurging on craft supplies at all. I have my own craft brand, you know what I mean? I just want to something like this. I wanted to make sure it was worth it, and I really like them, if I'm being honest. This hummingbird was the biggest pain to get out of all of the ones that I did. However, it was so worth the little struggle getting it out of there. I absolutely loved how this kind of tied everything in. Now the extreme worst part is being patient and allowing these to dry. You could wait about 3 to 4 hours, but I waited until the next day. Then it's time for the fun part. Finally, I'm going to take my DIY paint in the juniper color, and we're going to put couple layers. It took about 3 layers to get this entire bottle covered the way I want it to get covered. And if you wanted to try some DIY paint or you're looking for a retailer, I use Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs. Her link is usually listed below in my description box if you're watching this on YouTube. Now, if you're using resin for your molds, you're going to probably have to coat them as much as your bottle. But the clay pieces absorb right away, and you can usually do that on your last layer. So I allowed this to dry overnight. And then the next day, I came in with some of my Dixie Belle gilding wax colors. Okay, I get my Dixie Belle supplies from Shayna Robinson, and she's usually on Facebook or whatnot at Robinson Repurposing for anyone interested. I took that gilding wax and just went inside all the details of the molds except for the bird. I left that primarily blank, and then grabbed my Waverly Ivory color paint and a chippy brush and made sure that that brush was super dry and gingerly went over the entire pieces of the IOD molds. I made sure to get as little on the actual bottle as possible. Now, if you wanted to dry brush your entire bottle, use whatever colors you use, whatever detail aspects you would like. This is how I chose to go about this. Please work with whatever you have that is in your budget. You can still accomplish this. I've absolutely done projects like this with just Waverly paints and the apple barrels. I let that dry for about an hour and then grabbed my Mod Podge Super Gloss. Wanted to give it that vase and look with that super shine going on here. I wanted to share how amazing this super gloss is. I know everybody's always into matte. Let me know in the comments if you would have popped a matte sealer on here or if you like the gloss and you would have kept gloss. I'm sure regular gloss would have been fine as well if you don't have the super gloss, but I think this turned out stunning. These beautiful two-tone high-end vase pieces seem to never go out of style every year. And it doesn't really seem to matter what store you go into, you can always find some inspiration to DIY on your own. Like this little piece I picked up from Dollar Tree that I've had in my stash. It looks like it's in the shape of a can of soda, you know what I mean? Anyhow, we're gonna first prep our piece using some multi-surface paint. I'm often asked what my favorite or recommended paint for glasses, and it's multi-surface. This paint is specifically engineered to be able to deal with surfaces that are slick and not porous. So it really helps to give you a nice base when you're going to be creating something on top of it, even something super simple like this two-toned idea. If you're a beginner at crafting, this project is right up your alley, people. Grab you some multi-surface paint. It's really inexpensive. I usually pick this up at Walmart, or you can grab it off Amazon. Little pouncer and tappity tap 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 all over the piece. If you don't want to see the texture of the tappity tap 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 in, once you get that first coat on there, you can absolutely grab yourself a regular paintbrush, or in my case, I usually use my TDS Creative fan brushes and go over with a different color paint. For us, we're going to use these two and mix them together. Now, if you want to use chalk paint, you can absolutely do that. It is a good alternative to multi-surface, especially if you want to distress something, because you cannot sand down multi-surface paint, but you can sand down chalk paint. So if that's in your mind when you want to do a glass project, chalk paint might be the way for you to go. Now I'm just mixing in a little bit of this brown acrylic paint to go with our white multi-surface so we can create another color for our main color after I got that base on here. You don't have to do this part, and if you buy multi-surface, just grab whatever color. I didn't have the color I wanted. I wanted to do like a two-tone brown. So I tappity tap tap tapped this layer on here until we have full coverage and then allowed it to dry. I thought this turned out really beautiful, and for our texture portion, I just put a scoop of my homemade DIY texture paste, which is just baking soda, calcium carbonate, and glue, okay? It's a little dried up because it's been sitting off to the side for a minute, but if you mix some paint in with it, which we're going to here, it softens it right on up. This is going to be really thick, and you can apply this however you would like. As you see here, I'm just taking a pouncer. You can tap it or you can swipe it. I did both so you could see that it doesn't really matter. It just depends on whatever you're trying to accomplish. Once I had the bottom done, I then grabbed some of my washi tape and just kind of drew a little section. So once we were finished our textured portion, we had something that didn't look like a hot mess of texture smeared everywhere. There was like a little line of division there. And people, you can put that washi tape on from the beginning if you want to. I just did it after I got started. It really doesn't matter. One of the reasons I like using washi tape over painter's tape for glass projects is washi tape is not as tacky as painter's tape. So I really don't have to worry about it pulling up any paints that I have on the glass. Look at that texture going on down there. It looks like sand. We didn't have to use sand and we didn't have to use dirt. You ain't never gonna see your girl rubbing dirt on her projects. It's just not how I roll around this joint. I think this piece turned out super cute. I adore hand-painted decor, and I'm not always sure that I can recreate the design when I see them in the stores, but these pieces from Pottery Barn, I was pretty sure I could dupe. But instead of a vase, we're just gonna take the idea and remix it to upcycle a piece of decor. You know what I mean? Keep stuff out the landfill. Make sure your piece is all cleaned up, and then pick your paints. For our prep work, we're gonna use Folk Arts Multi-Surface, and then these two colors from Apple Barrel, and that's it. That's all we're doing here. First, we're going to get our base on here with the multi-surface, and I'm just using a pouncer. I'm going to tappity tap 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 that first layer all over the piece, allow that to dry, and then for the second layer, because I want this to be smooth, I'm coming in with my TDS Creative fan brush and doing a nice layer all over it. I wasn't worried about the top and I wasn't worried about the bottom because we're going to put this dark color on the top and the bottom. And it only took me 2 coats to get really good coverage. Again, using my TDS Creative fan brushes, feel free to use whatever brushes you would like. I sell these on my website, thediystruggle.com, for anyone interested. Remix this idea, use whatever color paints you want, because once I show you the technique to be able to get these little paint strokes on here, you'll be able to put these little designs on pretty much anything you would like. If you want to use chalk paint for this or whatever type of paint makes you fuzzy inside, you go right ahead. I love grabbing and using Apple Barrel paints, especially once I have the prep work. It normally takes maybe 2 coats to get good coverage, especially if I'm using a darker color, and it doesn't break my pocket. The trick to this little paint design is going to be one of these rounded brushes. Now, you don't have to break the bank buying a brush like this. They usually come in the paintbrush kits you can get from Walmart, or if you have a Ross near you, and they're just a couple bucks, okay? But you will need a round brush. First, dip it in your light color, get that nice and saturated, and then put that darker color on the tip of that round edge. And then you're going to press it down and drag it, okay? It'll start off fat, and then it'll get skinny, and you're just going to loop it. And in the event, like you'll see me how I do a skinny one here, you can go back in with more color and push to make the end fat, okay? Test it out on a piece of paper. It is super simple once you get the hang out of it, and most of the time, if you saturate the brush with the lighter color, you can make flowers with this. I've actually shared how to make sunflowers with this type of brush, and with this, you know, push and pull style. You can make flowers like this, sunflowers like this, little designs. So when I seen this on that Pottery Barn piece, I was like, oh, I can paint this. And not only can I paint it, I can show you at home how you can paint it as well. Once you have your main design, you can get as creative as you want, do these in different sizes, put more of the lighter color if you want, and pop as many around your piece. I decided to add 2 extras on the sides, on each side. I did not seal this piece up, but you could absolutely seal this with whatever you would like. Some good old Mod Podge would work, whatever type of finish. If you want to do satin, you want to do gloss or a matte, completely up to you. I think this piece turned out super cute. I don't think that blue and white china look will ever go out of style. Anytime I see a piece like this, it always looks high-end to me. Now, this piece wasn't too expensive at $9, but some can get a little hefty. And I'm gonna show you how to do it for free using an upcycled glass piece and a napkin. But first, we're gonna have to prep our piece using some multi-surface paints. And we're gonna have to make sure we have really good coverage because we're going to be able to see that paint behind our napkin. So I applied 3 coats of this multi-surface on here. I tappity tap the piece with the pouncer. I let it dry. When we got to the second and the third coat, I sprayed down the multi-surface to thin it and then busted out one of my TDS fan brushes to get a smooth look. I like the pouncer always as the first base coat. It helps me not have streaks all over the glass. It gets that paint on there, and then if I come in with the fan brush, that end result is usually pretty butter smooth. Once our piece was dry, I grabbed a napkin that mimicked that beautiful blue china look and some Mod Podge and my TDS Creative fan brush. And if I'm being honest, the fan brush and glass decoupage is kind of where I fell in love with fan brushes when I started many years ago. And also one of the reasons why I now have these as my own, because I love decoupaging on glass and with napkins, using them so much. I took the napkin and cut it down to size. You can absolutely do this however you would like, but I trimmed it with scissors first, and then I frayed all the edges by tearing them after I had it down to the correct size I wanted it. Decoupaging cylinder shaped things is difficult, so a little tip that I want to share is the napkin itself can be torn at the top in sections where there's no designs. Now, you can't do this with all the napkins, but this one in particular, you absolutely can. So I took a second putting the napkin down where I thought that it was going to lay, and then I tore the top areas where there was no design at all. So as I placed the napkin down and I attached it, it just wrapped around the top and it wrapped around the bottom without me having to tear and cut it as I was decoupaging. This is just something I learned along the way that is a little bit easier as you're decoupaging something that is round and you're trying to keep your design intact. If you want to decoupage your whole piece and pop Mod Podge or whatever medium you're using on there, you do you. I like to do napkin decoupage in sections because it's super easy to mess up. Now, this is just a dry sponge, a dry little kitchen sponge that I get at Walmart in a pack, and I cut them down in little sections. Once it gets saturated in a section, I'll flip it over and then grab a different sponge and I'll cut them up into little pieces and use them later when they're all crusty and hard to apply paint. Now, I just am showing you here how it wraps around beautifully. You can't even tell with that gorgeous white paint behind it that your napkin is not completely touching at the top or the bottom. And then I just continued with the same technique until the bottle was completely covered with our napkin. I tied this off with adding some twine around the top. You can absolutely put ribbon or paint the whole thing all the way to the top and apply your napkin all the way to the top. Entirely up to you. You can put whatever sealer you would like on this. It's absolutely up to you. I'm just going to put a layer of Mod Podge on this after this piece dries for 24 hours. If you're looking for more decoupage inspiration, check out this video right here. And as always, people, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. Until next time.